You are standing in the middle of a heated argument. Your heart is pounding. Every word feels like a weapon, every sentence a battle. You carefully craft your next response, determined to prove that you are right. But the other person? They are doing the exact same thing. Neither of you is listening, only waiting for a chance to strike back. And then, he steps in. He does not pick a side. He does not tell you what to say. Instead, he whispers something unsettling in your ear. You have already lost. What does he mean? You are fighting. You are defending yourself. You are standing your ground. How could that mean defeat? Because according to Nietzsche, the moment you engage in this kind of battle, you have already surrendered your power. True strength, he argues, does not come from fighting to be right. It comes from something far more unexpected. So, what is this hidden power? And why does silence often speak louder than words? Let's dive into his philosophy and uncover the silent trick that gives you real power. Most people believe that power comes from winning arguments, proving others wrong, and dominating conversations. But Friedrich Nietzsche had a completely different view. He believed power was not in words, it was in control. Why do people argue? If you've ever found yourself in a heated argument, you know how quickly things escalate. But have you ever stopped to ask, why do people argue in the first place? Nietzsche would say that most arguments are not about truth, but about deeper psychological needs. Ego protection. People argue because their identity is at stake. Accepting they are wrong feels like losing a part of themselves. The mind resists this at all costs. Power struggles. Many debates are not about facts or logic. They are battles for dominance. Who speaks last? Who controls the tone? Who makes the other back down? Herd mentality. Some argue not because they believe in their point, but because they want to be seen as smart, confident, or strong by their peers. Nietzsche saw these behaviors as signs of weakness. He believed that those who react emotionally to arguments are being controlled. The moment you let someone provoke you, you have already lost. Nietzsche's famous idea of the will to power is often misunderstood. It's not about brute force. It's about the ability to impose your will on reality. This does not always require words. Sometimes the strongest power is the ability not to react. And this is where the Übermensch comes in, the ideal superior individual in Nietzsche's philosophy. The Übermensch is not emotionally reactive like the average person. He does not argue just to win or prove a point. Instead, he chooses when to engage and when to remain silent. Because power is not about talking, it's about controlling the entire interaction. Example: imagine a meeting where two people are arguing. One is loud, aggressive, trying to prove they are right. The other is calm, collected. They listen more than they speak. They don't get dragged into emotional back and forths. But when they finally say something, it's powerful, well-timed, and shifts the entire conversation. Who really holds the power here? Nietzsche would argue that the person who stays in control, who doesn't react emotionally, always wins in the long run. Why strategic silence is more powerful than winning arguments? Silence, when used correctly, is not weakness. It's a psychological weapon. It forces the other person to reveal more about themselves. It makes them feel uncertain, making them second-guess their own words. It creates tension, and tension makes people uncomfortable, which gives you control. The Übermensch doesn't just stay silent in arguments, he uses silence as a tool. A pause, a moment of restraint, a well-timed response that flips the conversation in his favor. This is why Nietzsche's version of power is not about fighting. It's about mastering the battlefield before the fight even begins. Silence is not just the absence of words. It's a weapon wielded by history's greatest minds to dominate battles of intellect, business, and war. Nietzsche's idea of power was not about loud arguments or winning debates. It was about influence, control, and strategic restraint. Let's explore three legendary figures who embodied this principle. Socrates, winning without fighting. Socrates never engaged in traditional arguments. He did not yell, attack, or try to force his point. Instead, he used a technique so powerful that it still shapes intellectual discussions today: the Socratic method. a way of questioning that made people expose their own contradictions. Imagine this. A proud Athenian politician claims to be the wisest man in the city. Instead of outright challenging him, Socrates simply asks, "What is wisdom?" The man, eager to prove his intellect, begins defining it. But with every question Socrates asks, the definition falls apart. The politician, once so confident, now stumbles over his own words, realizing he has no true grasp of the very concept he boasts about. Socrates did not need to tell people they were wrong. He made them realize it themselves. He understood a fundamental truth. People don't accept what you tell them. They only accept what they discover on their own. This is the essence of silent power. Instead of engaging in pointless shouting matches, ask questions that lead people to question themselves. Steve Jobs, The Art of Controlled Conflict. If Socrates dominated through questioning, Steve Jobs dominated through strategic persuasion. He did not avoid arguments. He orchestrated them. His leadership at Apple was not about debating every small detail. It was about controlling the larger conversation. Jobs had a simple yet powerful principle. You don't waste energy on unnecessary fights, but when something truly matters, you go all in. Example, his battle with his own team over the iPhone's design. Engineers wanted physical buttons. Jobs wanted a full touchscreen. Instead of arguing endlessly, he led them to see his vision. He let them debate, let them express their concerns, until they realized, through his guidance, that a touchscreen device was not just possible, it was inevitable. He did not tell people what to think. He made them believe it was their idea all along. Most people argue out of ego to prove they are right. But Jobs argued with purpose, to win people over, not to prove a point. And that's the key. If your words don't move people toward action, they are just noise. Now let's go beyond philosophy and business to the battlefield. Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai, understood a simple truth. The best way to win a fight is to never draw your sword. Musashi won over 60 duels, but not just through physical skill. His greatest victories were psychological. He played mind games, unsettling his opponents before the battle even began. Example, his duel against Sasaki Kojiro, a master swordsman known for his deadly speed. Musashi didn't challenge him head-on. Instead, he showed up hours late to the duel, making Kojiro furious. By the time Kojiro finally faced him, he was so blinded by anger that he made mistakes, allowing Musashi to defeat him with ease. Musashi knew, if your enemy is emotional, they are already weak. Nietzsche's philosophy aligns perfectly with this. The Übermensch does not react. He controls the reaction of others. Musashi proved that silence, patience, and psychological dominance are often more powerful than brute force. What do Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Musashi all have in common? They never wasted energy on useless arguments. They did not react. They dictated the terms of engagement. They understood that true power is not in words. It's in influence. The next time you feel the urge to argue, ask yourself, am I reacting emotionally or am I controlling the situation? Because true power is silent. Why do we feel the need to prove ourselves right? To fight back? To defend our ideas, even when the argument is going nowhere? Most people believe that arguments are about truth. They are not. Arguments are about power. The more you argue, the more you reveal about yourself, your insecurities, your emotional triggers, and most importantly, the fact that someone else is controlling your reaction. Nietzsche understood this deeply. His concept of will to power was not just about physical dominance, it was about controlling yourself so well that others fall into your influence without even realizing it. And modern psychology proves just how accurate Nietzsche was. Cognitive biases. Your brain wants to win, not learn. Confirmation bias. We only look for information that supports what we already believe. Backfire effect. When challenged, we don't change, we double down. Dunning-Kruger effect. The less we know, the more confident we are in our opinions. Emotional triggers. Why we take arguments personally. Arguments feel like attacks on our identity. That's why debates about politics, religion, or philosophy turn ugly so fast. The need for validation. The real reason people argue. At the core, most arguments aren't about truth, they're about ego. People don't just want to be right, they want to be seen as right. The Übermensch does not fall for these traps. He does not react. He observes, analyzes, and then decides whether or not to respond. Silence is powerful, but does that mean you should always stay silent? No. Nietzsche's will to power was never about passivity. It was about domination, growth, and self-overcoming. Power is not in silence alone. It's in control. Avoiding conflict completely is not wisdom. It's fear disguised as restraint. The Übermensch does not argue over petty things, but he also does not run from necessary battles, because conflict can be a crucible for strength. When should you engage? When the argument sharpens your thinking, when it reveals deeper truths, when it pushes you or others to grow, when it shifts power in your favor. When should you not engage? When you're just defending your ego, when the other person isn't open to change, when it's a pointless emotional battle, when your silence itself is a power move. Imagine this. You wake up one day and a voice tells you, you only have 100 words left to speak in your entire life. Every sentence, every word now carries weight. Would you waste them in a heated argument? Would you spend them trying to prove yourself to someone who isn't even listening? Or would you choose them carefully, like a warrior sharpening his final blade before battle? This is where real power lies. Nietzsche understood something most people ignore. Words are currency. The more you spend them carelessly, the less valuable they become. So, the next time you're about to argue, pause. Instead of reacting immediately, observe. Watch how the other person reveals their weaknesses. Listen. See how they show you their fears, their insecurities, just by the way they speak. Then, when the time is right, choose your words like a master, or don't speak at all. Because true power is silent. Want more insights on philosophy, psychology, and power? Hit subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a deep dive into the ideas that shape the way we think and live. Stay sharp, stay powerful,